Yo, what is up YouTube? It is James here, and today we're going to be going over the JamesWBaek Piplup's roster for the Wolfey Draft League Season 2. For those of you who are new to my channel, I'll be explaining the Wolfey Draft League as well as the previous history of the Wolfey Draft League, and then we'll be going over the roster. I'll also be mentioning how draft works, so yeah, but man, it has been a while, and I mean a while, like 6 to 7 months, which honestly is kind of short. I thought we were not going to start like another Wolfey Draft League Season 2 conversation for like at least a year. I really thought we were going to wait a year until Champions like deep in, but no, we're getting started with the first season of Champions going into the Wolfey Draft League Season 2, so that's going to be exciting. If you don't know what Draft League is, so Draft League is a pretty interesting format compared to like standard competitive play. We have 8 coaches, which have 8 teams, and they do fight each other on a round robin schedule. And the top 4 teams at the end of the regular season do move off into the playoffs in order to compete for, of course, the victor. Now, what's interesting about Draft League compared to standard competitive play is that normally in competitive VGC, you're going to be fighting a lot of Pokemon consistently. Like, for instance, you're going to fight multiple opponents that might have an Incineroar or Charizard or Eternal Floette. But Draft League is a little bit different because when a Pokemon is picked for a certain team, only that player can use that Pokemon. So, for instance, as you see on your screen, I have a Mega Blastoise on screen. Now, no other player can use Mega Blastoise, so all my opponents would only be facing me with Mega Blastoise throughout the entire draft. There are maybe a few exceptions when it comes to Mega Evolution rules, so that is a thing to keep in mind, but that is basically how the general thesis works. So, going to be pretty exciting. And for those of you who are new to the channel from Pokemon Champions or maybe from the Wolf Draft League Season 2 announcement, we are having the coaches come back once again. We only have 1 new coach, or I guess technically 2, because there's 1 new team that is going to be replacing the original Uzi roster and the Thunderclap Titans, I believe that was the team called. And we are going into a Season 2. And for those of you unaware, I was the Season 1 champion. It was me versus Wolf in the finals of the first season, and Blastoise was a huge factor of JamesWBaek Piplups securing the win and winning the first season of the Wolfey Draft League. And that's kind of a reason why that we're going to be having the Mega Blastoise as our first pick. So I do want to give a huge shout out to CB Marcus, who is the one who created this like program in order to showcase this slideshow very nicely for the JamesWBaek Piplups for this roster video, as well as a lot of the other graphics we'll be using for the Wolfey Draft League in general. And also huge shout outs to my team building partner NJ11, a huge contributor to my win in Season 1 of the Wolfey Draft League. And he and I discussed this team for the Season 2 quite a bit, and we went back and forth on a lot of different team ideas that we had going into the Season 2. But yeah, we started this project like quite a while ago with draft, and it just like rushed forward. Like, we had the board and then no one had a plan, because like after like the point value system works out. By the way, I should also explain that with the Draft League, because I didn't fully explain it. With Draft League, it's a little bit different because we are going to be having a roster of 10 Pokemon per team. You bring 6, of course, to each week. You're allowed to change sets, but also each pick that you do have is valued at a point system between 1 to 20 points, and each team has a budget of 100 points. So for instance, this Blastoise I think was 17 points, which means that it is already 17 points out of 100. All my other picks have to be a total of 83 points. So that's something you have to keep in mind, which means that the draft budget is pretty tight. It's an average of 10 points per pick. So you really got to be cautious about what you draft specifically. So that's another thing to note. Really want to give a huge shout out to NJ11 once again for helping me construct this current draft. We went through a bunch of plans back and forth, but let's get started with the actual roster. We have the Mega Blastoise here as our first pick, and if you don't know, in the Season 1, Blastoise regular form was a huge MVP of me being able to secure the championship, and I think it's only right that he is retained on the roster for Season 2, and yeah, this is going to be a pretty big one. So I was also like, in draft placement, we do a snake draft in order to determine like who gets to pick what, and I was 6th place on that snake draft roster. So snake draft is basically, okay, there are 8 players in a random order, and then it goes from like, okay, player 1 picks, then player 2, player 3, player 4, player 5, player 6, player 7, player 8, and then it loops back around. So then it's player 8 gets to pick the second pick next, then player 7 and player 6, and so on. So I was 6th place, which is not an ideal spot. It's towards the middle, and that means making the draft is a lot harder. Usually you want to be towards like 1 or 8 or maybe 2 and 7 in order to like be able to get consistently like 2 picks in a row, which is generally what you want since you pretty much avoid sniping in most cases. And 6th place isn't the greatest because I'm late on my first pick, but also like I have to worry about a lot of potential snipes in the upcoming part because of course Champions MA, which is the VGC format that we're using for this, is a very limited deck. So that's going to be one thing in mind. We also have limited items, which is also going to come into factors. There's no like non-fully evolved Pokemon. There's no Violet. There's a lot of items that weren't in this game compared to like Scarlet and Violet, so something you have to keep in mind when team building. So it's an entirely different draft league setting that I am going to be playing in. So Mega Blastoise was the option here, and it was like, okay, usually with team building you want to have a centerpiece generally, and I was also wondering if I also go with like just regular Blastoise because there is a difference between Blastoise regular and Mega Blastoise. If I choose regular Blastoise, I get so many different items like the Wider for Shell Smash, for example. I could run like Citrus Berry or Leftovers for recovery. I could run like the Resist Berries. I can run like Mystic Water or boosting item. Like there's a lot more flexibility in regular Blastoise. However, if I do choose Mega Blastoise, I do get access to his Mega form. However, it is of course locked to holding that Mega Stone only. I can only have the Mega Stone attached to Mega Blastoise whenever I decide to bring it. And I did vary the items a lot when I used it in the first season of the Wolfey Draft League, but I do think that I could probably have gotten away with like no items in general. So I felt Mega Blastoise would probably be valuable because those stat increases are pretty significant. Look at the stats of this Mega Blastoise. Base 120 defense, base 115 special defense with 79 HP is really solid. Base 135 special attack stat, really hard hitting, especially with the Mega Launcher ability, which increases the power of some of its attacks like Dragon Pulse, Aura Spear, Dark Pulse. So it actually gets really good coverage, and it's a very flexible mod. One of my philosophies in Draft League is value for points as well as the ability to be flexible. So those are like my main 2 criteria of like how I like to draft, because those are the values that I think are the most important, at least when it comes to Draft League, especially again in a limited point setting. So was it worth the extra points to get Mega Blastoise? And I do think so. I wasn't really like keen on a lot of the Mega Evolutions for starting out, and I knew that like Pokemon like Mega Gengar and Mega Float would probably be taken. There was like, okay, Archaladon, which I was thinking about, but Aaron did get Archaladon because he was like ahead of me, and I wasn't surprised to see Archaladon. I was like, there's no way I'm getting Archaladon. I know Aaron's gonna get it. He got Archaladon, and so we go with the Mega Blastoise here. And I felt like it was probably like one of the better remaining Mega Evolutions I could have access to, just because of how flexible it is. As I mentioned before, it could be a multiple attacker mon, simply as that. It could be a Shell Smash setup mon. It could be a support mon with like Fake Out, Life Dew, Icy Wind, Yawn. It gets a lot of great moves in general. So I do think that Mega Blastoise was a mon I was really looking forward to using. And again, retaining, I think, a champion would be a pretty cool story. So we are going to go with the Mega Blastoise this setting. And I also did have options of like choosing a non-Mega Pokemon, but like there wasn't really anything too keen in mind. I think having the bulky water just makes a lot of sense, because in this format, there aren't that many ways to hit bulky waters. Of course, in draft, it's going to be different because now you can actually run like some surprise techs like random electric and grass type coverage options. But overall, there aren't the best ways of hitting really bulky water mons in this draft. There are very few electric mons, and the grass types are very limited. So I decided, you know what, bulky water just makes so much sense here. Mega Blastoise is super flexible. It kind of fits that criteria. 17 points is a lot, but I do think that it is probably worth it on a mon that is as flexible as Blastoise, and still cheaper than some of the mons that like have a lot more power, but again, a little bit less flexible in mind. So chose the Mega Blastoise as the first pick. And I do think that it does provide some nice bulk, offense, and again, support to the team. Next Pokemon, as I said before, I do really love value. Value in draft, I think, is super important to me. And next Pokemon is either you're going to go for the most value, or you're going to choose something that only that Pokemon can do specifically, which I felt like both were pretty reasonable for my next pick. And that next pick, as going to be the Tsareena. So Tsareena, I think, is a really good mon in this format because for some reason Tsareena was 8 points, and I thought was like, okay, there are a lot of value picks in this draft just because there are like no non-fully evolves like the first season. So draft's value just went up. Like the power level, I think in this draft is just way more than like previous drafts. But role compression wise, there are very limited roles on like what they have access to. Like there's very few intimidate mons. There's very few like speed control mons in general. So some things that I just wanted to make sure I had locked down early. And there were two things that I was looking at, which were Farigiraf and Tsareena, because they both have the ability to priority block. And there's a lot of moves that have priority, I think, in this format. Of course, like maybe it's less to draft. There's like Sucker Punch, King Gambit, Aqua Jet, Basket Legion, Quick Attack, Sylveon. There's probably less of that in Draft League, but I still think priority is still a pretty big thing in this format. So I was like, okay, I will probably want a priority blocker. And for regular Blastoise, it's a thing. Like, I think a lot of us know about, like, the Rain Dance plus the Blastoise. I think a lot of us seen the Scarf Vivillon team if you played VGC MA, and I'm not really a big fan of it, realistically. I feel like it's not that hard to break through, in my personal experience. Maybe it could be a bit different, of course, in Draft, where you could do, like, Fake Out Nasty Plot for Farigiraf, but I think Farigiraf was just so expensive. I believe it was 15 points, and I just wasn't comfortable with spending 15 points on that mon. Yeah, I do get access to Trick Room and a few other things, but I don't think I really liked the point value when I knew that there were probably other Trick Room users that I was really looking into that seemed way more worth it for the priority or the priority blocking, as well as like the trick room options later on. So I decided, you know what, Tsareena at 8 points just seems like a steal. Like, I'm pretty sure Tsareena was 8 points. This thing was a steal. Like, I think having the ability to just run offense is pretty solid. And again, as I mentioned before, when I was drafting Blastoise, there's very limited options to be able to actually hit bulky water types. There are very few grass types, as I mentioned before, and the electric coverage, very little as well. So I decided, you know what, I'm gonna be annoyed at like dealing with bulky waters because Blastoise can't really hit them that hard, and also like priority blocking seems solid on the team because for Shell Smash Blastoise, priority is gonna be a little bit of an annoying thing to deal with when you're +2 speed but -1 defenses. So you know what, I was like, okay, Megas Blastoise really gets complemented by Tsareena here, has access to Helping Hand on Tsareena. If we had Feint too for the wide guard situations, oh my goodness, that would be great. But Tsareena did lose Feint in prior generations. However, Helping Hand is still good. It got buffed with Trop Kick because Trop Kick is now a bit more powerful. Also, like just having a bit more defensive options too. There's some surprise moves that Tsareena does have access to that can help the team just bulk it out. It does have some pretty good coverage too. It gets obviously the strong grass type moves, but it also gets access to Triple Axle, Play Rough, the Fine type moves, and High Jump Kick, which hopefully I never have to run, but it also gets a low kick as well. But it does get some pretty decent moves for what it's worth, and for 8 points, I felt like it was super valuable. Queenly Majesty, as I said, the ability to block priority, super massive, but it also gets Sweet Veil, which is pretty solid. It means that it can't fall asleep with the allies, so in a format where like you don't have like Safety Goggles or Lumberry, I think that could actually come into play, which is super valuable. And then Leaf Guard, I mean, there are Sun teams. It could be a thing that I could bring, and something I did keep in mind as well. So I thought Tsareena had so much value at 8 points, and Tsareena Blastoise seems super threatening. If I have it under Trick Room, if I have it under Tailwind, just being able to block the priority and just fire off like really powerful water spouts, yeah, it seemed incredibly powerful. So we ended up choosing Tsareena as the second pick for the Blastoise. Now, next pick we have is going to be kind of a surprise. It's going to be a Espathra, and I don't remember how expensive a Espathra was, but this Pokemon was super cheap. It was super cheap. I think it might have been 4 points if I'm not mistaken, or something incredibly low. It might have been 5, but I think this Pokemon was insane. If you want to know what time the draft period was, this was like really early VGC MA, and one thing that was super rising at the time was like the Calm Mind Baton Pass Espathra. Like a lot of Japan players were using this on the Champions ladder, and I was like, this mon is really good. Like I was looking into it for competitive as well, but I also felt like this mon is probably insane for a draft. A lot of them is just the Calm Mind Baton Pass set, but I think this mon has a lot more that it can do, especially for the point value. too good. It has access to, of course, the Calm Mind Baton Pass. It does have access to other abilities. And I think one thing that really impressed me about Espathra was Wolf used it actually in the first season of the Draft League, and he was able to do a lot of crazy stuff with Espathra. He was able to do some speed boost shenanigans. He was able to use Frisk Trick Room as well. Like, I felt Espathra was super flexible and really nice too, because it's actually a wall breaker. Just Lumina Crash is an insane psychic type move. There's very little counterplay to it because the only thing you can really do, I guess, is a White Herb, but otherwise, like, you need to have the White Herb expendable, which is a big thing. There's no clear amulet, so Lumina Crash into a special attack follow-up from like Mega Blastoise will delete teams. Like, it's absolutely absurd what you can do with it. You also have Baton Pass Calm Mind, which you give it to Blastoise. I mean, it's like a Shell Smash without having to take the defense drops, which can be really nice. I also like having the priority blocking with Tsareena, which is great on a speed booster mod. You also have weather moves that you have access to with Espathra in both, I think, Rain Dance and Sunny Day, while having speed control with Pounce if I have to. Skill Swap too is like a really unique move. It can go for Trick Room. There's so much I think Espathra can actually provide value to the team for that little points. I was like, yeah, like, I think that's insane. Also, like, just speed boost, being able to play around like Choice Scarf mons or some of the faster mons in the format, just allowing more offensive pressure. I think this thing's pretty insane. For the amount of points, it's just way too good. So Espathra was my third pick, and I chose it more like as third pick mainly because I felt like someone was gonna get this. Like, I think the early point or the low pointers are just mons that like you have to get worried about getting sniped on, especially later in the draft. So I was like, I'm pretty sure someone is gonna pick this up because of how insane it is for the point value. I'm like, someone has to get it. And since I didn't have like a concrete plan of like, okay, what is the rest gonna go, because this draft has been kind of vibe based. I think a lot of players didn't have an actual plan going into this. It was more like a vibe based because of just like, okay, we kind of just started like immediately. Like, we didn't have like too much time to prep, so we just went straight into it. I think that with Espathra, because I didn't have like a full on, okay, vision of like, okay, am I going to go with like this Tailwind mode? Am I going to go with this Trigger mode immediately? I felt like it was a flexible enough mon that I could work on either side. And again, the value for points, so I can save it for future mons later on, is something that I felt was 100% worth grabbing early. So we chose Espathra as our third pick. Now, next Pokemon we have gonna be the Rotom-Heat, and I think fourth pick I actually wanted Crocodile potentially, but I think Joey sniped Crocodile ahead of me. I really wanted an Intimidate and Dark type, but I do know that I really want to have a good Fire type as well, because that was a big thing that Season 1, I really wanted a good Fire type early on because of kind of limited Fire types, I think, in the format just in general. And I think MA also has this problem where if you're not using one of the Mega Evolution Fire types, it is pretty lackluster when it comes to all of these special Fire types especially. So I was like, okay, NJ really liked the idea of Rotom-Heat on this team, and I agreed with it. I think Rotom-Heat's really solid. You might be thinking maybe I could have gone Incineroar and maybe gone a bit more expensive, but I don't think Incineroar is worth the, I don't remember how many points. It's like super high up. Like, I think it's at least 17 points. I don't think it's really worth it. Yeah, I have access to Fake Out Shell Smash, but I don't think it's really that necessary personally. And I just, again, don't think the point value is really worth it for having Incineroar when I could just have like more valuable mods in general. So Rotom-Heat here was definitely a consideration. I think I was also debating a few other Fire types, like potentially Salazzle, because of the access to Acid Spray and Fake Out, which is nice. I also debated about, I think, a few other rare Fire types like Cerulege. There was just a bunch of Fire types I was considering, but I decided Rotom-Heat was a pretty solid mon because that speed that it could run, like 86 again, it's pretty flexible. As you can see, like Tsareena, Blastoise, and Rotom-Heat, they aren't the fastest mons, but they have pretty decent speed. And then when you pair it out with like a speed control method like the Tailwind or the Trick Room, I think they're both very flexible. I could also run like a Choice Scarf on the Rotom-Heat. It's a pretty good Choice Scarf mon. It does get access to screens. It gets access to Will-O-Wisp. It gets access to Nasty Plot. It gets access to just multiple attacks, which can be effective. Electro Web, Thunder Wave for speed control. I think Rotom-Heat is pretty solid, especially paired with Blastoise. So I thought, you know what? I think it's a pretty good pick here. I think Rotom-Heat plus Blastoise plus Tsareena, pretty good synergy. Just having my Fire, Water, Grass core out immediately. I have another way to hit bulky waters, which is always really nice to have. a resistive fairy, which I think is very much appreciated again, because at this point my draft was lacking a way to really be able to hit those or resist those fairy type moves. So having Rotom-Heat can be nice into those. And yeah, I felt Rotom-Heat was a good enough Pokemon for the team, and again could provide some stuff that it does have access to. A good offensive coverage. I felt the point value was pretty good. I think this was like more of a fair than like super high value, but I do think that it has the good rolls that I need to, and just having a ground immunity on the team is very much appreciated. So Rotom-Heat was picked. And the next Pokemon, I was looking at so many fairy types, man. I was looking at so many fairy types for this draft. I was looking at like Mimikyu, I was looking at Florges, I was looking at Klefki, like all the undervalued fairy types I felt like were actually pretty good for this draft, like in general. Like all the fairy types, because Sylveon, I think, was taken at this point. Gardevoir was taken mega-wise. Regular Gardevoir, I'm not that big a fan of personally. There was also like Mega Floa, which was like first pick in the draft. I felt that if I was going with this Blastoise route, I knew I was going to get like a really good value fairy eventually. And I was debating about, okay, what do I exactly want to go here? And I decided, you know what? Mimikyu has access to Disguise, which is pretty good. Aromatisse, though, I felt like was pretty insane, especially for the point value again. I don't remember if this was like a 5 or 4 pointer, or maybe it's higher, but it was just so low for what it can do. The fact that it gets access to pretty decent bulk, like base 101 HP is actually really high. Its defense like okay, 72 isn't the greatest. 89 special defense is pretty solid. It can take attacks. It has access to a pretty strong Moonblast, like 99 special attack for a fairy type that isn't named Eternal Floette or Mega Gardevoir. It's actually pretty decent across the board. And then you have access to like a bunch of support moves that the Aromatisse has access to. It's pretty good. And Aroma Veil is just such a good ability. And I think this is where I kind of started counterplaying some of the drafts, because there were like 2 Sableye's, because Mount got Mega Sableye and then Aaron got regular Sableye. And I'm like, okay, there's going to be Encore Disable shenanigans. There's probably going to be like some priority taunt users. And one thing that's really cool about Aromatisse is Aroma Veil, which means that it does prevent my Aromatisse from getting affected by like taunt, but also like Encore and Disable, and also the allies as well. So I felt that could be really cool on a Shell Smash Blastoise, because I have multiple ways to block like the Prankster ones with Tsareena plus Aromatisse, which is super solid. So if I want to go Shell Smash route against those teams, like it's really effective there. I just really like the idea of Aromatisse. It does get access to Trick Room, so I can go for like that fake out Mega Blastoise plus that Trick Room Aromatisse. And I also have access to Heal Pulse on Aromatisse, one of the few mods that get like really good recovery, which is why I think Aromatisse is a little bit over floor, just because it does get access to recovery for the allies. Really important on I think on a Blastoise team to have access to multiple recovery options, because of the fact that, of course, Water Spout is based on the amount of HP you have, so you want to be as healthy as possible. Aromatisse helps with that. With Heal Pulse, does get access to Rain Dance. It gets access to a lot of support moves, actually. I'm pretty sure it gets access to Encore. It gets access to Screens. There's so many good moves that Aromatisse just gets access to. Its coverage isn't terrible either. Like, it actually has a few options where it can actually hit pretty hard. I felt that Aromatisse was just a perfect mod. And again, point value-wise, really good. Fairy on the Trick Room, so I can go for like sweeping with Blastoise plus Aromatisse is pretty effective. Yeah, like I felt it was a great mod to have. Again, point value, super valuable. Even Healer as a regular ability is actually pretty solid, because with Aroma Veil and the Queenly Majesty, there might be some times where they just decide, I'm going to scrap Taunt. It's not going to work. He's going to have Aroma Veil. I can run Healer if they try to status my other Pokemon. I'm like, oh, if I have a chance to heal that status, that could screw things really up, especially since status is really big, I think, in this kind of format. So, yeah, Aromatisse has really cool options, I think, and I'm excited to use it, because I haven't used this thing, I think, since Gen 6, and I actually liked using this in Gen 6, especially in the Trick Room team. So I want to try it out again, and we'll see how it goes, because I think this mod's really cool. Next Pokemon we have is going to be Snorlax. And let me go through my logic of using Snorlax, because we did play some counter play mind games. So the idea was, we were in the middle of the draft. Me and NJ were kind of constructing. This is like a really important time in the draft, because every pick is going to matter, and snipes are super important in this part of the draft, because it can really make or break your entire team, because everyone's like, okay, they're kind of like running out of points generally. So you want to make sure you get the roles that you really need on a team. And if you get sniped, you could get absolutely screwed, or you have to pivot massively, which is something that you really have to consider. So me and NJ were considering a bunch of different routes that we had. We were going with like, okay, we had like 2 different main routes that we were considering, and it's like easier for me and NJ to plan out than I think other competitors, because as you can see from my draft, I really didn't pick expensive picks. Like most of these picks are pretty low. All of my opponents like kind of blew their budget out super early, which meant that like, okay, I can kind of plan out my expensive things later that have like way more important roles, and then I just have to figure out like how to fill out the remaining with the few amount of points, but I can actually pick those first. So that's actually really important, because I don't really have to worry about my late game mons being sniped, because everyone's going to be out of points by then. But the low value picks, I have to make sure I get them immediately, and I can actually go for them right now, because I don't have to worry about getting sniped with my more expensive points. So the things that I was looking at were 2 different routes here with me and NJ. We considered either a Prankster Tailwind Whimsicott alongside Mega Aggron as a secondary Mega, or we were going to go with like a Dragapult plus Mega Lucario different route. And we were like debating about like, okay, a lot of these different point structures, and it really just came down to like, okay, who's going to get sniped what? Because like a Mega Aggron, for instance, gets sniped, because I was like, okay, maybe it does get sniped, because there is a pretty decent chance it does. Like we could have seen now like a few different drafts. We were like, okay, then it's probably like we have to pivot to a different mode here. So we want to make sure that we pick the mons that were like more likely to get sniped, but we also could pivot in that case if it did. It's like not that big of a deal if like my Mega Aggron got sniped. It wasn't even that big of a deal that Crocodile got sniped, although I would have really liked Crocodile. I'm just saying, Joey, I would have really liked Crocodile. He saw how, because I would have liked to retain Crocodile as well, because we did actually use it to win season 1, and Crocodile Blastoise put in work. Joey didn't want me to have that, but you know, there was something I also didn't want someone to have, and that was Mr. Aaron Cybertron Zhang, because he had Sinistra, he had Sableye, and I feel like if he got Snorlax too, it was just going to be impossible to break through that draft. I think it was just going to be impossible to break through. And also Snorlax was super cheap. I think it's like 4 points. Like or maybe it's like, it's somewhere between 4 to 8. I'm pretty sure it's on the lower end. I'm pretty sure it's not 8. I'm pretty sure it's like 4 to 5. It's super cheap for what it is. And looking at like some of the future picks that me and NJ were considering, a lot of them were either Fire or Ice Week already on top of our team. So we were going to have maybe like somewhere between 3 to 4 weaknesses in both Fire and Ice potentially. So I did really want to make sure I had resist to Fire and Ice coverage. And one thing that I felt that was pretty cool to see was Snorlax, because it's a Fire Ice resist because of its Thick Fat ability, having the damage from taking those kind of moves. But also like Snorlax is also a Ghost immunity, which for like Basculegion, for the Mega Gengar, as well as the Mega Frostlass, that's actually really important, because I didn't have any Ghost resist, and I actually didn't plan on getting any Ghost resist for the most part afterward. There was like maybe one other Pokemon I was considering, so I was like, you know what, Snorlax makes a lot of sense. It also makes a ton of sense with the Aromatisse, because I do have access to Heal Pulse. I can go for Belly Drum Snorlax as well, like Belly Drum Snorlax plus the Aromatisse Heal Pulse, super threatening under that Trick Room mode. And yeah, there's like a lot of things I can do with Snorlax. It gets a lot of different access to set up with Curse. It gets access to the Belly Drum, as I mentioned before, but it also gets access to Stockpile. There's also like Yawn support. There is a lot of coverage Snorlax gets access to as a normal type, because it gets a lot of great physical attacks in general. So Snorlax to me seemed 100% worth it. Value for points, 100% worth it. Gave me another Trick Room Abuser, which the best one I had at the current moment was Blastoise, really. But now I have actual mod that can kind of commit to Trick Room. So felt Snorlax was actually pretty good on the team. So that's why we are going to go with Snorlax as the next pick. Make sure that Aaron doesn't get it with Sinistra Sableye, but also just like Snorlax is pretty solid, I think, on my team, because there's a lot of damage reduction that I can do with this team with access to like screens, Wisp, and more. So Snorlax might have an easier time to be able to set up. It's a really hard Pokemon to stop when like there's not like a bunch of sneezers that you have to deal with in this format of draft. So I felt Snorlax super valuable, especially for its like point worth. Next Pokemon we have, As you can tell, we didn't go the Whimsicott Mega Aggron route because Mega Aggron did get taken, so we did actually go with the Vivillon route, which I don't mind. I do like having Prankster Tailwind. It probably complements my playstyle a little bit better, but I don't mind Vivillon because it does get a bunch of different options that it has access to as a support Pokemon. Like Whimsicott's really good, but I think it might be a little bit overvalued based on price wise, but I think Vivillon makes a ton of sense. It has access to, of course, the redirection of Rage Powder, and no safety goggles is pretty big in this format because a lot of Pokemon can't really ignore the redirection. You also have the Sleep Powder as well, which I think we all know about, like the Scarf Vivillon Blastoise team that dominate MA. That thing is super annoying, and now I have access to it, but I could also just run it with Focus Sash because Vivillon is one of the fastest Pokemon in the game. 89, which means if you run Timid Nature, you outspeed like a bunch of Neutral Nature base 100s, which is a pretty big deal. You also have like pretty hard hitting Hurricanes. Hurricane actually does hit hard from this Pokemon because of the same type attack bonus and the power of Hurricane. You also have access to a bunch of other support moves. It does get access to Pollen Puff, again, recovery. As you can see, really appreciate it on my team, especially with Blastoise and Snorlax. You have access to Light Screen, Struggle Bug. You have access to really good abilities on this mod because it gets access to 3 fantastic abilities. Shield Dust, preventing secondary effects like a Covert Cloak basically, can be valuable. Friend Guard, which is nice on a support Pokemon like Vivillon, reduces the damage that allies take from any attacks that they receive, which is really good for Shell Smash Blastoise. Compound Eyes, accuracy increase, Hurricane, and Sleep Powder. Yeah, this mon gets so many good abilities that you have to prepare for. And also like gets access to Tailwind, redirection, a lot of things that my team really does appreciate, especially the Mega Blastoise, because under Tailwind with redirection, there is so much that Blastoise can do that you have to be fearful of. So I do think that Vivillon, really good pick, especially I think it was like 10 points too. Like it's actually pretty reasonable compared to like Whimsicott's. Was it like super high? It's like somewhere between 18 to 20. It's like absurd. It might be actually, maybe it's a bit lower, but I think it's pretty high if I'm not mistaken in the draft league point system. So Vivillon I think was super worth it. I do feel it has a bunch of different options that I do have access to. I mean, Whimsicott's nice for just generally sweet because Priority Tailwind is just absolutely insane, but it's not like I have the craziest mons that take advantage of Priority Tailwind that isn't Blastoise immediately. So I felt Vivillon with the support option because it can be used as a redirector for like the Trick Room mode as well as the Blastoise mode. I think kind of fit the team a little bit better here. Next Pokemon we have gonna be the Hisuian Samurott, and basically I already knew what my last 2 picks were gonna be for this draft, so I basically just needed a filler for like the remaining 4 points that I was going to be utilizing here. And I was like, okay, what Pokemon's going to fit here? Because what's going to get me the best value for the 4 points is going to be like pretty important. So I was looking around. There wasn't like too much that I was like, okay, I need this. But I felt Samurott is pretty nice. For 4 points, this mod, like 108 attack is not much. I'm not gonna lie. Its bulk is kind of fake. Like 90-80 does not feel like 90-80, and then 65 special defense is not great. But sharpness, increase in the power of its attack, or some of its attacks by 50%. Think of Sacred Sword, think of Ceaseless Edge, Aqua Cutter, Night Slash. Then this mod, we're talking about some damage. So I was using Hisuian Samurott as well, like I was testing it out for a little bit, and this mod pretty insane for what it has access to. And one thing that I really wanted to note was like, okay, since this is a draft league with very limited held item options, Focus Sash is going to probably be a common held item on teams. Being able to set up the Spike Slayer with Samurott could screw so many Focus Sash plans in mind. So I was like, you know what? Samurott makes a ton of sense here. It's decent, flexible speed tier, can be used in Trick Room and Tailwind, and I already did plan on drafting a second Mega. And I thought, okay, there might be times where I don't want to really I want to have the water type, but I don't want to really bring Blastoise as well. So having the option to have the Hisuian Samurott, I felt like made a ton of sense, because it's another water type that water types are just really good in this format. The dark coverage is really nice because I don't really have any dark resist otherwise. So having that dark and ghost resist is pretty crucial here. And just having access to multiple priority moves. Sacred Sword is really strong of fighting coverage because of that sharpness ability. Like this mon, I think, had pretty good potential. Again, as I mentioned before, has setup. There is quite a bit I think Samurott can do. And for 4 points, man, 4 points, I think this was a steal. Like, I think this was a steal. Then we can actually just focus down on the last 2 expensive picks, because I knew that me and NJ were like, okay, we're gonna wrap it up with some expensive picks because no one can snipe us here. So I was pretty happy with like the consistency of like, okay, we got the lower points out of the way because it was easier for us to like already have the plan in mind since we already saved up the point values earlier. Now we're gonna do some shopping. This is the K-shaped economy. Everyone else on the bottom end, James stocks up on the high end, and we have Dragapult as our first pick for the expensive picks of the Jubilee Piplups. And Dragapult, it's actually funny because I don't think this Pokemon is that great, obviously, in MA. Like, obviously, there's no good offensive items, which Dragapult really appreciates. It really wants that choice band. It wants the choice specs. It wants the life orb, which unfortunately all those items aren't in the game. But one thing that makes Dragapult really stand out is this is draft especially is the speed tier. It is one of the fastest Pokemon that isn't a Mega Evolution in the game, and most players aren't running like the Mega Aerodactyl either or the really fast Mega Evolutions. So Dragapult is one of the fastest Pokemon in the game, and one thing that really helped me win, I think, the first draft league was just having speed. As you can tell, since I don't have the Prankster, Tailwind, Whimsicott, I do not have access to a really fast mode here, and I would have to rely on Vivillon to up Tailwind, but Vivillon, again, if it gets blown up by some of the faster draft compositions like Mounts draft, I do not think it's going to be a fun time. So I do want speed for my final picks of this draft league. We have Dragapult here, which is going to be one types that I really like on the team, Dragon and Ghost. Ghost is a really good offensive coverage. Dragon is both good offensively and defensively in this format. Just felt like Dragapult did make a ton of sense. I do think like its offensive coverage is a lot weaker in this format, but it still has some decent ones. Dragon Darts is an okay hitting move. Phantom Force is still like able to hit through Protect, which can be useful in some situations. Then you have access to special coverage, which is actually pretty nice. Shadow Ball is going to hurt. Let's get access to Draco, Flamethrower, the Thunderbolt. Like, it actually is decent here. But I think where Dragapult really shines is it does get access to a bunch of support moves, which can be very useful. Fast Thunder Wave, I think, is kind of insane in this format with like lack of speed control. Fast Will-O-Wisp too, with a lot of the physical attackers, just how powerful they are in this format. And I don't have to worry about like Kingambit, Basculegion on every single team. That would normally outspeed Dragapult, especially with our Choice Card Basculegion. Yeah, I don't have to worry about those. So I decided, you know what, Dragapult probably is better in draft than it is. Like, I think it's expensive for what it is, but that speed tier is just so crucial here that I'm like, okay, I'm willing to take the expensive pick here because the offensive coverage is still pretty decent, but the support moves are also pretty insane. It gets screens, gets access to status conditions. It has Dragon Dance if I really want to go with like a setup route, which is a possibility if I really want to. Yeah, it does get quite a few of those specific options. So felt that the Ghost is also going to pair with my final Mega Evolution as well, but I do think that Dragapult's really nice. The 3 abilities is really solid. Clear Body, as we all know, just being able to ignore any stat drops, which is really nice against like Icy Wind, against Intimidates and more. Cursed Body, which can be really effective as a way to steal a game, which can be really nice. If Dragapult's able to disable a attack from my opponent, that's really important as I sacrifice it. Yeah, that's actually really nice. And then Infiltrator, when there are a bunch of screens mons in this game like Sableye, Infiltrator, ignoring those screens, yeah, it can actually be pretty impactful. So I think Dragapult was a really nice pick here, and it complements the last Pokemon, especially for like really heavy hitting, fast speed coverage. Gonna be the Mega Lucario, and I think Mega Lucario is a pretty cool Pokemon. I really want to use it in regular VGC, but the problem with Mega Lucario is it just generally is pretty frail, and it's really hard to justify Mega Lucario, I think, when Sneasler is a Pokemon that does really similar roles without having to sacrifice the Mega Evolution role. It's a Mon that just is able to do a lot of damage with Meteor Mash to hit the fairies, and then, of course, the really strong fighting coverage. However, only one player can have the Sneasler, and you know what, Mega Lucario, really hard to switch into. That adaptability, increasing the same type of attack bonuses from 1.5 to 2x. it hurts. That close combat really hard to switch into. Gets a lot of options as well. Not only does it get access to supports like Heal Pulse, which I don't know why it gets Heal Pulse, but like other options as well. It does get access to a lot of setup moves. Like it gets all of it, right? Like it gets Swords Dance, it gets Bulk Up, it gets Agility, it gets Calm Mind, it gets Nasty Plot. This Mega Lucario gets access to all of them if I want to go with that route. It gets a lot of good coverage with the Elemental Punches with Thunder and Ice Punch. It also gets access to, of course, the Dark coverage, Ground coverage, Rock coverage. Steel and Fighting, of course, is really good offensive coverage, especially paired with Ghost, which is going to be my Dragapult. I felt that this is going to be a really nice ability. And of course, the regular form is also pretty solid because I can do Justified with the Mega Lucario as well. I can also do the Inner Focus to block Intimidates and prevent flinches from the regular Lucario. So when it Megas, yeah, it's going to be pretty hard hitting as well. So I do think that Mega Lucario really nice. It's also one of the faster Mega Evolutions in the entire game. And one thing that this draft was really weak to, fairies. I only have one resist. Unfortunately, I didn't really get to keep up with it because originally I did plan on, I was like committed on using the Mega Aggron route the entire time. And then when Mega Aggron kind of got taken, I was like I was debating about Steelix, but I was like, I don't really want to get T-Tar too. And I feel like the sand damage does kind of hurt the Focus Sash usage that I can bring with Vivillon, potential Dragapult, the Blastoise. So I was like, you know what? I might as well just decide to go with hard hitting, knock out the fairies in one shot, and that is going to be the Mega Lucario. I'm playing a bit more offensive playstyle, which actually it's funny because I don't think I really play this kind of offensive playstyle in the most part. Usually I'm really loving having Intimidate, Fake Out, Positioning, but we're going to be trying a bit more offensive, and then there's a Trick Room route. So I think we have a lot of value for the draft. I think Mega Lucario, again, being able to just nuke stuff with Meteor Mash is going to be a pretty important matchup for fairies, but the fighting coverage just as a backup is pretty nice, and I think there's a lot of things that my draft does have access to synergy-wise. There's a lot of ways to be able to have speed control. There's ways to reduce damage output with like screens, Wisp. There's obviously Sleep Powder on Vivillon, Friend Guard too. I do have a lot of setup mons with Blastoise, the Lucario, Tsareena Lucario can also be scary with the Queenly Majesty. Queenly Majesty just like pairing well with pretty well against with the fast mons like Dragapult, Lucario, and of course Espathra and Blastoise. I do have some speed control modes with Trick Room and Tailwind, and of course Thunder Wave. There is quite a bit I think this draft can do. So I'm overall pretty happy with how the draft turned out. I think the only tools I would have really liked to have, which just is a preference as a VGC player, is like Intimidate, of course, and Fake Out, but it's kind of hard to have it on this draft because there are so many tools you want, but it's not enough. If Joey didn't snipe Crooked out for me. But I do think that the draft overall is really solid, and I really do want to thank NJ for helping me because we spent several hours kind of like going back and forth on depending on like which option we should get next and like which route we should go for after, especially during the mid-draft portion. So we'll see how this season goes. I really do hope that JamesWBaek Piplups can at least maybe make the playoffs. We'll see. Obviously, I would love to defend the title, but it's going to be pretty hard. This draft is definitely going to be a complicated one to pilot because I think one thing that's going to be a problem with draft is like I had this problem in the last season, and even though I did do really well in the first season with like domination wise, I do think that having too many options can be like a hurtful thing at times because it's like there's so many possibilities that you can run with this draft. There's so many considerations. Obviously it's going to be a pain for the opponent to also like plan for the draft because there's so many headaches that you have to deal with on my team. But I also think it's like, okay, what gets lost in the sauce? Do I play it safe? Like, there's so much that I think I can do with this draft. So it should be a good one. I'm really looking forward to this season. I really hope that we are able to put on at least a good show for the JamesWBaek Piplups. And we'll see, because this is going to be the first Mega Evolution draft I've ever done. So should be pretty exciting. If you want to check out all the coaches, I'll link them down below. Again, shout out to CB Marcus, who made the graphics, as well as NJ, who had really helped out with this team. We'll see how the regular season goes. You'll catch the main action on the main YouTube channel, JamesWBaek Pokemon. So, or PKMN, because we abbreviate it there. So if you want to see the matches there, it'll be every weekend. And I might decide to stream watch parties of like the other matches. Maybe I evaluate them on the bonus channel. I haven't really decided what my plan is for the Wolfey Draft League season when it comes to content. Let me know what you want down below in the comments. And yeah, we'll see. Also, if you're going to ask me for a tier ranking, I'm probably going to skip it for at least until playoffs where we have established. I did that for the last season because I don't really like tiering stuff without knowing how the player can utilize all the tools. I can give a general baseline, but you know, like sometimes Joey's drafts, like this one looks probably one of his better drafts, theoretically, but some of his crazy drafts have really shocked a lot of players and people. So you never know. And I would like some more data before like making like an analysis. But that is going to be it for me. Make sure you check out the JamesWBaek Piplups and myself on the main channel. And I'm looking forward to the draft. And I hope to see you for week 1.